324, you're usually doing something that's much more symmetrical, right? But what this exercise does by picking just 2 or 3 teeth in an area is it teaches you how to prepare your proximal contacts when there is a tooth adjacent that you're preparing and when there is not. And so, you know, that's the reason these sets of 3 are chosen, is to help point out when to break the contact and when not to. With lower anterior veneers, they're almost always a heavier preparation because you have to involve the incisal edge. When you think about it, you don't want to have the incisal edge be the margin. So a straight facial veneer on a lower anterior tooth, that functional edge is always going to be crossed during function, during just regular chewing. That's where the action is going to be, is right up at the incisal edge. And so to do just a facial only veneer on a lower anterior tooth it's a rare situation. You want to involve the incisal edges. Consequently, you need to wrap around the interproximals a little bit as well, so it turns into that reverse 3/4 crown design that we were talking about. So your 6878K018, that big workhorse diamond, is the one that really does the lion's share of this preparation. There'll be a time where when I'm right up next to tooth number 25 that will not be involved in the preparations, where I'll drop down to the 012 just because it's a smaller diameter there. But the other thing on these that is really key is your reduction guides. You can cut them up any way you want to, but I found that for lower anteriors, if you can cut your guide, and I don't know whether you can see that, but this is right along the labio-incisal line angle. I've tried to cut it there. And if you make your cut there, it serves as a nice guide for your incisal reduction when you put the guide in place like that. And then the other 2 pieces are simply divided evenly, pretty much just mid-facial. You could cut your reduction guide into 4 pieces if you wanted to, but usually 3 is enough. And so you've got the gingival aspect. I don't know whether you can see that okay there. And then your middle aspect, and they've all just been kind of trimmed so that they fit. And I can use any one or a combination of them as a reduction guide. So let's go ahead, we'll set those aside, and we'll start our preparations. We're looking for 0.5 to 0.7 facially, and then that's going to increase a little bit as you approach the incisal edge. Incisally, we're going to reduce a minimum of 2 millimeters so that you have enough strength in your material as it wraps over the incisal edge. And then everything internally needs to be rounded. So let's go ahead, we'll get our section going here. And you're just following the contours of the teeth you're preparing. Why am I not? All right. Action. We have action. And for lower anterior preparations, you want your patient Trundelenberg. You really want them back, or at least their head, so that you can get a good look at those teeth. I would probably even tip this individual back a little bit more like that. Now I've messed up everything with the camera,
I got
right?
it.
How we doing?
You're
doing
good.
Okay?
Yep,
all
you're
right.
perfect.
Now what's wrong with my... I thought we had action here.
Just on it too.
There we go. Because we know we're going to be breaking completely through interproximally, when you get to those areas, you can just kind of push on through that to the other side, to the lingual. You want to maintain that flat profile of these teeth. Mesiodistally, they're fairly flat. You want to maintain that. So I've done about enough to where it's probably a good idea to check with our reduction guide now. So we'll start with this gingival rascal, if I can get it situated. This is another reason you want your reduction guide to go several teeth beyond the teeth you're preparing. Now, I don't know whether you can see, does my mirror help you see into the reduction guide there at all?
Just a second.
It's actually pretty close right there, so it needs some refinement. I don't see any super thin areas. Can everybody see that?
No, there you go. Tilt your mirror down just a little bit more. There.
Can you see in there?
You'd have to tilt it a little bit more. There you go.
Is that better?
Oh, that's too much now. Right in there.
Right
okay.
There. Can you see that gap? We're just looking for, okay, are we uniform? Are we in that 0.5 to 0.7 range? Looks pretty close to me. So we'll set the other one on top of that now to get a little better view incisally. Yeah, and we're under reduced, especially on tooth number 23, facial, right? Can you see? So let's set those in place. That one doesn't want to stay without a little help. Yeah, so we're under reduced incisally. Can you see that?
No, I see. Let me.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll put these in place.
We can't get the camera at the right angle in order to get that.
Oh, okay. So will the mirror?
The mirror won't show it either.
Okay. Trust me. It's under reduced inside, near the incisal edge. So we'll go back, and so in my mind now I'm thinking, okay, a little more reduction incisally, and then I'm going to refine it now. I want to refine my margins facially, and just make it nice and smooth and uniform. And this is. I like to steady my handpiece oftentimes with my other hand. if I'm doing kind of fine-tuning work like this. Again, a little bit more incisal. I'm going to save that distal for later with my smaller burr. It's important that you don't leave any little fins of enamel interproximally, and usually that's not a problem on these because by the time you do your incisal reduction, it's taken you so far to the lingual, you really don't have to worry about it. Again, I have to come up here and make sure I do a little more. At the incisal. Now let's check and make sure. We'll probably have to extend a little bit more to the lingual with my proximal cuts. Maybe not. They're looking okay so far. We'll go back and check our refinement out. Again, you want to be using your guides a lot. I'm a little under-reduced on the distal of the canine, which I would expect at this point because I still haven't finished that. A little over-reduced on the mesial of the canine. Not a major bad thing, but not good. So a little more refinement facially. I'm going to flatten this out, the profile of this. Part of that over-reduction at the mesial is to get that interproximal chamfer right and not have any undercut by the time you finish your distal. Because you can get an undercut, especially on a canine, because you're wrapping around that tooth so far. So sometimes you have to sacrifice and get a little over-reduction. So let's drop down to the 012. Now, and we'll finish up the distal of the canine and the mesial of the central. Oh, 10 points. 10 points off.
I don't know if that was the next.
Yeah, it was, and I was just funning it. Okay. It's easy to do, though, isn't it? Okay, on this one, again, we want to go all the way through, but we just want to play it a little bit more conservative. Let's take a look at those now. Again, we're trying to make sure we eliminate any little thin wings of enamel. And we're pretty much there. So we'll refine those interproximal cuts, and then we'll do our incisal reduction. Probably just a little bit supragingival on the lateral. So we'll go back to our bigger diamond and I'll kind of refine that so I'm not so supragingival, straight facially right down here. Good there. So it's time to do incisal reduction now. You can do this one of two ways. You can use your 1557 carbide. That's easy because it's 1 millimeter in diameter and you just go down roughly 2 millimeters. If you don't want to change burrs, just stay with your diamond. That's easier. And if you've trimmed your reduction guide in such a way that you've cut this at the labio-incisal line angle, you can use this to help measure that. So we'll go ahead now. The angle at which you do your incisal reduction is lined up the same way that you would do incisal reduction on an upper anterior tooth, only now you're perpendicular to the axis of the tooth. So it's this labio-incisal that can't the line angle that's created by that incisal edge. So we're not just going to cut them off parallel with the occlusal plane. We're going to cut them off fairly perpendicular to the axis of the tooth, of the axis of the actual tooth, not the opposing tooth. Okay. So I'll do a couple of guide cuts to just put me in the zone. That's probably a little shallow still. Let's see if we're in the ballpark with those. One way we can check it too is I've saved a little bit of the top edge. Is just top edge of the inside the ledge. Well, there actually isn't much inside the ledge left there, so that's not going to work. Sometimes if there's some inside the ledge left, you can use that as your reference. So we're going to have to go to our reduction guide, and we're pretty darn close. So we'll connect those. So it's a little under-reduced on the distal of the canine still. And the lateral is still slightly under-reduced. So let's take a little more off there. Still at the distal of the canine a little, and the lateral. So got to take a little bit more down. That's another reason on this this reduction guide that you want to cover the entire lingual aspect so that this guide can nicely adapt to and stay in place. So, getting a perio probe in there is tough, but we are in the zone there. That looks good. So now we add the chamfer onto the lingual, and it's just ever so slight with this. All you're trying to do is help guide this veneer into position with almost, it's just like a linear dimple, if you will. I'm just using the tip of this diamond, and I'm blending it with that that vertical chamfer that is created interproximally. So there's a round transition there. Can you see that? Right there. You want to round all those transitions. So look at it from the side. I've got some sharp enamel still, especially on the central, that I don't like right at the transitions there, so we're gonna have to soften that up a little bit. So let's work on, I'm gonna do some of that with the 012, so I'm gonna keep this diamond in, and I'm gonna do the rest of the rounding that I can fit with this diamond. This angle right here, when you go from facial to incisal, that really has to be rounded right through there. That's a kind of a high stress point in the transition. Right along here, we're going to really round this one. Let's drop down to the smaller diamond and we'll just finish these up there. So again, this one was getting a little tight with that bigger diamond. I'm just taking some time to round that transition. Looking at it from all angles. Make sure you don't get an undercut in your canine. You can facially. Doesn't look like we have one. But check for that. Check for any thin enamel, thin little slivers, especially interproximally. Look at it from all different directions to make sure you've adequately rounded. And I can see a couple of sharp spots that I don't like. Now it's to the point where if you keep fiddling, you're just going to make it worse. So we're about there. Again, just looking at it to make sure I haven't left any sharp spots. Put your reduction guides back in place, just to kind of do a final check. You can see that we have plenty of incisal clearance. I don't know whether you can see that or not. I can maybe, let's see, does that help? You see that? Nope, that doesn't help, does it?
No.
Makes it worse. What I can do, try this. There. You see that up inside there? Kind of gives you an idea. And if you trim that reduction guide so that you're along that labial-incisal line angle, it'll allow you to kind of envision your ceramic going up and fitting into, you know, to that shape to ensure that you've reduced enough incisally and facially. And then the other thing that's kind of important at this stage is with your gingival pieces, you know, see if I can see those. Okay, there's the gingival, and then we can add the, and it is important to add that incisal piece. You can tell a lot from the one that fits over the lingual, but this also can be helpful. I can get them all in place here. This allows you to look down, get it all to stay here and hold it in the right place. Okay, now if I can just put this in the right spot. Can you see down through there?
There you go, right there.
And make sure you don't have thin areas right there in that transition from facial to incisal. Right there. So any questions? Hopefully that helps. These are a more aggressive veneer prep, but one that, you know, you can apply to lower incisors and they work great. If you have an intact lingual surface and you need to do some extensive restorative incisal lengthening or whatnot, these types of veneers are a great application. So, doctors, is there anything you'd add to what we're talking about here?
I have a question.
Yes.
You said you don't want any fins of enamel.
Uh-huh.
So do you go all the way through the proximal area?
Almost. As you can see, I've kind of stopped short. I didn't leave, but the exits are close to 90. That's what's important. Your chamfer exit should be close to 90 degrees, and if they leave a thin sliver of enamel that's really thin and less than 90 considerably, you've got to keep going on through to bulk it up a little bit. But I didn't have to. I was able to go, you know, and the criteria on this is about 1/2 to 2/3 of the way through to the lingual. You usually will break out at about the right position.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay. The only other thing that as I look at these now, that's actually pretty good. I was thinking tucking them in toward the lingual gingivally, but they're far enough. So. Okay,